This is a production of the AJ Podcast Network.
Pushing and pulling, I want you, but you wanna leave. I hate you, I love you, you love me, yeah, you gotta be. If I'm your cage, leave. But if you stay with me, eventually we'll find happy.
Here we go again with another episode of the Passage Home Podcast starring the Dr. Stanley Russian. I'm your co-host, Back Civilian. Now, while you guys are at it, go ahead and visit our podcast and all of our sites and all of our links on www.linktree.com/Passage Home Podcast. I'm going to say it again, www.linktree.com/Passage Home Podcast. There you will find all of our links where you can listen to our shows. And don't forget to ask Alexa to play the Passage Home Podcast for you. And again, don't forget to ask Alexa to play the Passage Home Podcast for you on iHeartRadio. And no, don't forget my other podcast starring my boy AJ and myself and our newest co-host, Anne Marie, and it's called I Can Relate to That. Again, you can look us up on www.linktree.com/AJ and Bax. And you can also ask Alexa, play the Passage Home Podcast for you. Now, if you need to get in contact with us, passagehome@gmail.com. If you're interested in sponsoring our show, Passage Home podcast@gmail.com. Now, without no further ado, Dr. Stanley Russian, how's it going today?
I am amazing by the grace of God. Everything is amazing.
Yes, sir.
Today, we have a guest coming on. Full disclosure, Mark and I were formerly colleagues, and we've met at different stages throughout our careers and our cultural endeavors. Mm-hmm. And I'm just honored to have him on the show. I mean, hey, Bax, where do I find all these people? God's really been blessing.
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely blessing. Definitely blessing, Dr. Stanley Russian. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so without further ado, I want to introduce Mark Hawkings. And first I want to ask him, since he's in the virtual green room, how was his gift basket? I wanted him to sort of freestyle on this because I don't know what was in it. I don't know what they left him, but I'm sure it was some apropos. I told him he was straight out of Compton. So,
City of Compton.
Yes, sir.
CPT. Yes. Well, first of all, Bax and Dr. Stan, I want to say thanks for, having me on, and I appreciate the invite and the engagement of three guys just chopping it up. To answer your question about the gift basket, I would say, let me see, peace, love, and goodwill to all people, and it's looks like it's a message here that says work in progress. So we're working on it. That's for sure.
All right. A little inside joke between me and Mark is do the work.
Yes.
Go to work. Go to work.
Go to work.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
We have a colleague. That's her tagline to everything. We call her the go to work girl, and she's very inspirational. Nichelle, shout out.
Yes, Red Diamond, otherwise known as Red Diamond.
Yeah, Red Diamond in the house for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, Mark, give us a little bit about your bio, and I say a little bit because we still got a show to do.
Right. I hear you. I'll try to keep it brief. Let me see. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll do it this way. So I just released a book, sort of a memoir and some essays, and it's called DJ Clientele: The Autobiography, Essays, and Writings of a Modern Day Renaissance Man. Right. So there's a lot to unpack in there, but I would just say in a nutshell, artist, musician, educator, activist, entrepreneur, and just an all-around empath, and someone who is really about leaving this place better than when you first came in it, and then also while you're here, helping to improve the lives of others. That's kind of like me in a nutshell, man.
All right. That's beautiful. You leave me speechless already.
You leave everybody speechless.
Yeah. So let's get into it then. First, off the top, to cover the show's principles, that's something I haven't been asking people recently because we had so many interesting guests. But to stay within the motif of the show, you did some traveling through Africa.
Yeah.
And one of the things that it's good. Do you freestyle with your rap music?
Yes, I mean, for a rapper to be about this salt, you definitely can't be bought, but you also have to be aware that when people stop and stare, you just got to keep it moving because when you rapping, you grooving, and when you in that vibe and you keeping it live, people understand that you gonna thrive and you gonna strive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that covers our show because the show is about thriving in Africa. But before we get to that, I want to ask you about your spiritual experiences as you went through these countries.
Wow, man. It was an awakening for sure. Because, going in, let me just give you a little context and background. So I produce film projects, right? Films. And I also work with, some of our brothers and sisters on the continent. So I sit on the board of the Green Book Education Foundation, which is a foundation that helps to support children who want to further their education beyond just the equivalent of what we would call middle school or the 6th grade, if you will. And what a lot of people don't know is in some of the countries, if you cannot afford to go beyond a certain grade, then you're going to either end up, going into the workforce or on the streets or, some other economically disadvantaged situation that you're put in. So what the Green Book Education Foundation does is we adopt students, promising students in certain places, and then we further their education throughout, all the way through to college. So we were there doing that mission. But I was also there doing some location scouting. So I went into several of the countries, and what I learned from that journey is this. One is that we have not only a DNA connection, but we also have an economic connection and an economic responsibility to our brothers and sisters there, and vice versa. There's some synergy that could be happening right now if we reach across the Atlantic and take advantage of the commonalities that we have. And I know a lot of times in our historical record, the folks, Africans in America, were somehow brainwashed to believe or inculcated with this idea that the Africans on the continent somehow didn't like us or didn't jive with us or didn't want to connect with us. But when you go there, you realize you're just the long lost cousin that's come home. You're the brother and the sister that is now stepping back into, the kitchen. You are the mother and the father that just went around the block for a minute and you're back. And I never felt like a foreigner when I was there. I never felt like an outsider or an outcast. I felt like I just went to go visit my family. And that spiritual sort of feeling was so enlightening for me. It was so uplifting for me because we all go in with sort of trepidations and preconceived notions. And even with my background in ethnic studies and African studies, I still had, that Americanism is still there. And it's apparent how much is there once you get to the continent and you realize that, the culture, there are a lot of commonalities to our, culture in America, but also there's some differences, and you realize what those differences are. They become stark, once you get there. But I quickly shed my American sort of thought pattern and was able to just get right in there and groove and share in the spirit of everything that was going on the continent. So it was a beautiful experience.
And for the average person that's listening, what he just did was when I asked him, I didn't ask him to freestyle. I just asked him if he freestyled, but he freestyled for us. But one of the words in there was empath, and what he just described is how he connected spiritually to the brothers over there, tied it back to a holistic relationship that never ended, which goes back to Lady D's podcast saying that we just displaced, we still all the same people.
Yeah.
And so this is another verification of that. But he answered my first and second question, because I was going to ask him to talk about the connection to the brothers here, to the African diaspora. So, I mean, he's way ahead of the game. This ain't no average brother. This ain't no average brother we dealing with.
He's not. He's definitely not. But it's crazy how that connection in Africa is trying to be separated. And they're trying to do everything in their power to not make that connection. But then we talk to brothers like him and some of your other friends, they have nothing but joyous moments and great connections and life-changing moments over in that place.
Absolutely.
That gets deep.
Yeah.
And that freestyle was fire too. I like that freestyle. He was going off the top.
Yeah, that's off the dome. That's off the. I mean, listen, if you're an MC, you got to be about your salt. You know what I'm saying? You got to go off the dome. When hey, back in the day, man, I used to jump into ciphers everywhere and everywhere I could. From Laguna Beach to Paramount to Compton to Sherman Oaks. This is the whole LA area we talking about, just LA County.
Yeah.
Who's this dude? Where he come from? But it was about that. That's how you hone your craft. And in fact, I know that there was a story about the folks over at Death Row. When Death Row wanted to test them, they would take them to Watts and put them right out there in the middle and say, go for it. And you better sustain yourself. If not, you ain't getting a ride home. So, it's about being tested. It's about
that's what's up, man.
For real.
Yeah. Good. Cool. So this since a lot of our audience don't know your whole, and he's very modest about, in conversation with him, the Mark Hawkins is noted for writing the first rap song for Dr. Dre in his career, and they were in 8th grade together in Compton.
Yep.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So Dre and I, we've been friends since junior high school, and that was at Vanguard Junior High School in Compton. That's where we both attended. We lived in Compton. At that time, one day he disappeared, and we didn't see him anymore. Found out later on, the story is that his family moved. I think they moved to Long Beach or somewhere like that. But and he was just going back and forth between Long Beach and his grandparents' house over in Compton. And then so a few years later, while still in high school, I had won a rap contest at this club called Eve After Dark. And it was a club that was managed by a guy by the name of Disco Lonzo, who later became Grandmaster Lonzo. And Lonzo was the founder of Disco Construction Productions and the Wrecking Crew, which was a DJ crew at the time. But he was interested in getting into the music business and making records. But he needed an artist. And when I won the contest, he asked me to join the Wrecking Crew, which we later had to change the name to the World Class Wrecking Crew and malappropriate the word wrecking. Instead of ING, we had to change it to IN, take the G off, because there was a rock band or something, like a cover band with the name The Wrecking Crew. So we did that. But the day that I went up to meet with Lonzo, I saw the skinny kid who I remembered from junior high school up on the turntables practicing. And then I said to myself, well, if he's in this, that's my buddy from junior high school. That's Dre. If he's in it, then it probably will be something good. So I joined it. And I think he and I joined maybe around the same week. And, we started being the DJ crew eventually for the radio station KDAY. And we had released one record called Slice that was with me and DJ Yella. DJ Yella was one of the first DJs to scratch on the West Coast. And then that did pretty good. We started to get our feet wet and understand the music industry and how it worked. So the second song we released was called Surgery, Dr. Dre. And that song was pretty much about the DJ. And of course, the DJ was Dr. Dre, and equating mixing on the turntables to operating in the operating room. And so that's how it all came about.
Wow.
Right. And
that's
so
dope.
we're looking through, because you hit us so hard with information, with the deepest parts up front. I just want to get a little bit more into our relationship. We both taught in a school district. When I was the first Black male instructor in the district for 11 years or so, and then Mark came in and onto the campus, and in that atmosphere, we did phenomenal things. Me in technology, Mark in special ed. Mark, how did you get into special ed?
It's funny you asked that question because I used to, there was a teacher that I had met one day while we were doing Wrecking Crew stuff. And she said, hey, can you help me to sort of teach reading by rapping, right? And I kind of thought about it and said, well, that kind of makes sense. Rapping, words, reading. Okay. So her and I started putting together a sort of a project to kind of teach reading to a certain, group of kids. And so while I was doing that, I was visiting the library doing research, and I kind of liked it. Of course, I like reading. I was, voracious reader and avid reader of everything, any subject under the sun. When I was younger, I would love going over to my grandmother's house because they had a set of encyclopedias there, and I would just pick a volume and just, zone out. But so this teacher asked me to do that, and that became so successful. It translated so well. I'm like, wow, I want to continue this. And so while I was in school, I had actually changed my major. Eventually, I changed it to African Studies, and then when I finished there, while still making music, I said, I want to go back and I want to pursue a teaching credential, because I liked that experience that I had, being able to teach stuff. And at the time too, while I was going to the library, some of the cats in the hood, they saw what I was doing, and on the slide they came to me and said, hey man, listen, I only have like a second grade reading level education. Can you teach me how to read? And so I started doing that too. I actually started tutoring classes with the homies in the hood, and I liked that experience, right? So that's why I decided to go head on and pursue a teaching credential. And a lot of those folks, they had some learning difficulties, and that's what made me want to go into special education, because it was just a connection that I had with that. And so so I started doing that.
That just shows how much of a tool that music can be used if it's used in the right direction. And I really want to give you kudos and a shout out just for keeping the purity in the music, and because that's what you did. You kept the purity for what music was really originally made for. There was a purity to it, and you using it to teach these children. That's commendable. I respect that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I just want to point out something to you, Bax.
Yes, sir.
Remember our guest of Lady D?
Yeah, she said the same thing.
Into mnemonics.
Yeah.
Do you use the term mnemonics when you're teaching music and
mnemonic devices?
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, we had a guest that mentioned it earlier. Plus, I started doing that with my attorney. We started STEM schools for children using mnemonics. I want to give a shout out to Ava Laye, who's still doing that. She's doing it with 18 to 24-year-olds right now that are on probation. And she started doing it way back when back in about 91, 92, and wrote a curriculum for that. Then Lady D, I want to give a shout out to her. I know she's listening, but she mentioned it last week. But all that's still here. And for those who really who've never heard this before, you can raise the grade point average of a student who's in special ed to bring them up, to mainstream them through using mnemonics. So everything happens for a reason. And I didn't know, right now I have 3 guests that have tied into that. So that must be a message that's necessary to be heard out there for the audience.
The Most High telling us something. The Most High is definitely telling us something.
Right. And so I enjoy him as a colleague, another brother in the district, that was challenging. I'll just say that.
I would say like this, when you're in situations where the imagination is restricted and the creativity is restricted, it's difficult to sort of maneuver through that because the universe is infinite. And there are infinite numbers of ways to reach students. And it's our job as educators, as teachers, to try to leave no stones unturned to help students to learn. That's our number one objective. That's our prime directive. But when the bureaucracy gets in the way of that creativity, then it makes it that much more difficult. It's a choking effect. So, you just got to find higher ground, man, and move to a place where where you can do what you got to do.
Right.
Wow.
But, and it depends a lot on the principal. Certain principals came in and said, hey, be creative. Just get the information into them. We don't care if you use rap or whatever. They didn't know what they were doing, but they started applying it then in that district of keeping kids interested in the class, because there were certain things that we brought to the table that made kids interested in coming to school, period.
We brought the funk. Let's be real.
There's something about that rhythm. There's something about that rhythm.
Yes.
I just want to be where the rhythm at. Everybody wants to be the rhythm is. That's why when you buying stuff in the stores, they're playing good music. They make you spend your money, and you dancing there spending your money. It's something about rhythm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we brought so much funk that they weren't ready for it. When I would go in Mark's class, he had the worst of the worst of the worst on the campus.
Yep.
Kids that weren't even allowed out at the same time with lunch with the other children. Because they, these were kids, but they all had something in common. They were all what we call kinesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they learned through movement.
Yes.
And the fact that through mnemonics, you can have them think on a higher thinking scale and create at the same time, so that the information understanding just flows into their channels. When they're being yelled at in a class where you got audio and visual learners, while they're moving around, the teacher says, something's wrong with him. He can't be still. But that's the way they learn through movement. And those teachers know that. Mm-hmm. But this is easier for a teacher to teach the way that they learn than to teach the way that children learn. So, Mark, what I've done with my relatives and parents with kids that move around, that have ADD, what I do is I tell them, I teach the student what a kinesthetic learner is. And I teach them to go and ask the teacher, what kind of learner am I? Mm-hmm. And when the teacher said, it ain't hard for a teacher to figure out and stuff. And when they say that, you create a contract. Well, if I'm a kinesthetic learner, then what things will you do to make sure I understand the lesson and hold them responsible for it?
That's right.
And man, they can't kick you out because you're moving and things. There's nothing wrong with you. All basketball players are kinesthetics. Surgeons are kinesthetics. Mm-hmm. All the sport. Dancers, musicians, princes are kinesthetic, but they learn how to direct that nervous energy. That's why he was able to play all of the instruments, because he's working with his hands and his head at the same time. There ain't nothing wrong with them. They have a lot to offer this world. And so, and they're some of the most intelligent students that I've run into. Awesome. Go ahead.
I believe that genius can come in many forms, and it's not always just sort of like the traditional Einstein, where a light bing goes on in the head.
Right.
But you know what?
Mechanics, but it also comes in the form of a musician, or in the form of and a person who's drawing, something visually, or even someone who is writing something and interpreting the world in a particular way. So we have to look at those things and understand that we have to meet students where they are, and then bring them into, where the goals are, where we want them to go in terms of the benchmarks. So, I've always thought that every year, every time, every classroom, I tried to shed all my biases, all of my preconceived notions, everything that I had about any student walking through the door, and make sure that, again, I meet them where they were at, to bring them along to where, they needed to be.
But you know what? It also takes vision, though, as a mentor and a teacher. You have to have a vision. And sometimes, that is just like handed down. Like I was looking at your grandfather. There's something that's in the bloodline who has vision. Your grandfather's seen vision in Jimi Hendrix. Help him get seen. Things like that. You and Dr. Stanley are mentors and teachers that have vision, and everybody that comes around you or comes through you, if they pay attention, they can learn something and elevate.
Yeah. Right. Just briefly, man, Curtis was my grandfather, Curtis McNear, Curtis Knight was his stage name. Okay. He was also the first person to bring ping pong to China.
Wow.
Yeah, he was over there. He served in the Army, and he did that. So many other things. The group that eventually became, Chic, the two girls from that group were actually signed to his production and his label first, and then Nile Rodgers came along and kind of scooped them up. But there was a lot of other stuff, and like you say, that vision. He had that vision. He was really good friends with John Lennon and Yoko Ono. The group Motorhead, Fast Eddie Clark, he was in his group first. So all of these people went on to do these great things, but again, they came through him, and he had that vision, to push them forward. So that's another. I totally agree with that, man.
Definitely.
Well, on that, I want to say that I just want to say that on what they were talking about, that the vision part is very important, because that gives you the tolerance to deal with somebody who don't see the vision. Throughout my life teaching, I started at 19 teaching guys that were older than me who were ex-offenders, who wanted to take the clipboard from me. I want to be like Stan, I want to walk around and hold clipboard all day, you know what I'm saying? I can't be getting my hands messed up. I gotta rub booties tonight. And so, so I felt threatened and intimidated, but I took them to where they needed to go. And throughout my life, I've been challenged, but I had the vision backs. And when you have that vision, you don't get discouraged by the people who don't see it yet. I took women from welfare to becoming millionaires, and they fought me every foot of the way. The minimum, that they
that's
got.
A whole nother, oh my God.
Yeah.
No.
We'll talk about that, but they were the first women to get trained in construction in Chicago, where they had 1/4 of all state contracts was set aside for women. And being a black female, you got even priority over that. But they didn't see it in the beginning. They were just there for the extra $5 an hour stipend they got that didn't affect their food stamps. And so they were just trying to survive. But I took them to the place where they all thrive now. The average woman in my group makes $6,500 a month in her pension, because I got them all in to working in the union at Argyle National Laboratory, which took them from where they were 18 to 24 all the way to retirement. And that's a blessing in Chicago, because the average man there is just trying to survive long enough to get to unemployment. The average white construction worker goes all the way to pension and stuff. And for them to be able to do that, now they have a club and they just jet set around the world. Their children are raised, went through college, and so on and so forth. But I had the vision, and so that allowed me to take everything they threw at me, because I know they didn't understand, or what was in it for them, until they caught on.
You know what's interesting about that, Stan, is that not only did you give them the tools to survive, you gave them the tools to thrive. And
yes, that's what it's all about.
Instead of just survival skills, you gave them thrival skills. And
there you go.
And like you say, that lasts for generations, right? Because those are skills that can be handed down. And that vision you had in instilling, that in them was not just to affect just their lives, but also to affect the lives of generations to come. That is a major accomplishment.
Hey, absolutely. They trained their children. And once the sisters that started construction companies, they retired millionaires, sold their companies to their children that they trained. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what you're saying. Yep. And never had to look back.
Awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, Mark, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. We're gonna have to have you back.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to get some more knowledge from him with the music. You and him, Dr. Stan, y'all can help me. I done been through some things, so I definitely would want to, rub shoulders and learn.
Well, I'm always down to pick it up wherever we left off, man. It's all good.
That's what's up.
All right. Okay. And with that, we're going to close out for this week. We got everything in that for this session. And the brother will be coming back. I'm once again, I'm humbled, to have this brother voice some of his knowledge. And so with that, we're going to close out.
All right, people, thank you for listening to the Passage Home podcast starring the Dr. Stanley Rushing. We had today Mr. Mark Hawkins on the show. And you guys have a great day. Keep listening. And don't forget to tune in to the Passage Home podcast.
What's stopping the trust? I've been bright all my life. I could see that we rush. Same thing happened to them. It's happened to us. We argue all night, then you backing it up. That's the story of our life. First we fight, then we fuck. You don't need me, I don't need you. When you say that, I don't believe you. You still want me.
This is a production of the AJ Podcast Network.